Elizabeth Blackwell, Breaking Barriers in Medicine. Imagine it's a cold morning in January 1849, and you're sitting in a small auditorium in upstate New York. The place isn't grand, but there's a buzz of excitement in the air. Most of the people around you are young men, fidgeting in their seats as they wait for the ceremony to begin. Suddenly, the room goes silent. The dean steps up front, holding a diploma. Everyone expects another young man to step forward, until the dean reads the name, Elizabeth Blackwell. No one moves. You can almost feel the temperature in the room drop a few degrees. A wave of surprise ripples through the crowd as Elizabeth stands and walks toward the stage. She's about to become the first woman in America to receive a medical degree. Some stare in disbelief, while others exchange knowing looks, as if they're witnessing something that will shake up medicine forever. But how did Elizabeth get here? And why did everyone else think this moment was basically impossible? From the start, becoming a doctor wasn't just difficult for Elizabeth. It was practically unthinkable. In the mid-19th century, medicine was dominated by men who believed women couldn't handle serious study or the sight of illness and death. Born in England in 1821, Elizabeth moved to the U.S. with her family in search of opportunity. Even as a girl, she was curious and outspoken, traits that didn't always fit the polite expectations of the time. She refused to be limited by a society that told her a woman's place was at home. But how did she actually get into a medical college that was so hostile to women? Turns out it was a bizarre twist of fate. School after school rejected her, until one small institution, Geneva Medical College, sent her an acceptance letter. Some said the all-male student body had treated her application like a prank, voting to accept her because they thought it was a joke. Little did they realize that their so-called joke would change the course of history. Once Elizabeth arrived on campus, every day felt like a test of her determination. She wasn't just dealing with the usual pressures of medical school, she was breaking an unwritten rule by showing up. Some classmates whispered behind her back, a few boldly insulted her, and others simply pretended she didn't exist. Some professors seemed torn between grudging respect for her intelligence and the nagging discomfort of having a woman in their lectures. She often studied alone, sometimes missed out on group discussions, and had to fight for access to the same dissection labs and clinical opportunities the men enjoyed. Yet through all the cold shoulders and side glances, Elizabeth kept going. She believed that once she finished her studies and showed her skill, people might begin to accept that a woman could be a real physician. Still, there was an unspoken question in the air. Could she keep her footing in a place so determined to see her fail? Finally, that January day arrived when the college held its graduation ceremony. You can imagine the hush that fell over the room as the dean announced her name. It was a soundless moment of tension, and then she stepped forward to accept her diploma. Some in the hall probably felt pride, but just as many were confused or even outraged. Newspapers picked up the story. Some praised Elizabeth's bravery, others criticized her ambition, claiming a woman had no place in the medical field. In those days, it was a big deal for the press to talk about a woman doing something unusual. Readers across the country woke up to headlines about her achievement, some applauding her, some calling it a scandal. Through it all, Elizabeth stood firm, understanding this wasn't just about her. It was about proving that women could handle the demands of medicine just as well as men. Of course, becoming the first female doctor in America didn't mean her troubles ended. Elizabeth's journal entries show a woman under constant strain, fighting both visible and invisible barriers. She wrote about how lonely it was, how people looked at her with suspicion, and how some hoped she would drop out altogether. Many believed her success would set a dangerous precedent, opening the floodgates for more women to claim professional roles. In quieter moments, she doubted herself, wondering if the isolation was worth the cause she was championing. But if she gave in, she feared it would slam the door shut for all the women who might come after her. She had to succeed, not only for her own dreams, but for anyone who believed women deserved the same opportunities as men. Her journey then took her across the Atlantic to Europe. She went to London and Paris to sharpen her skills in fields like obstetrics and gynecology. Even there, she hit the same wall of prejudice. Some hospitals restricted her to training areas they considered appropriate for a woman, like midwifery, rather than letting her observe surgeries or more advanced procedures. Still, she absorbed every bit of knowledge she could, determined to bring top-tier medical expertise back to the States. When she returned, she wasted no time putting her vision into action. She set up the New York Infirmary for Women and Children, focused on caring for underserved communities. This wasn't just a small clinic. It was an institution where women doctors could practice without the usual discrimination and where patients could receive compassionate treatment. For many women in New York, it was the first time they felt truly heard and understood by a medical professional who shared their experiences. Once she had the hospital up and running, Elizabeth turned her attention to creating a pipeline for future female doctors. In 1868, she founded the Women's Medical College of the New York Infirmary. This college became a place where women could learn medicine in an environment free from the scorn they faced elsewhere. She wanted them to have the same rigorous training men received, without constantly fighting for a place in the classroom. That vision changed countless lives. Graduates from this program, like Dr. Rebecca Cole, the second African-American woman to earn a medical degree, went on to make waves in their own right. Slowly but surely, the idea that women could be physicians went from an outrageous notion to something the public had to respect. It wasn't always easy. Many hospitals still refused to hire female doctors, and plenty of patients were skeptical. But at least now, women doctors had each other's support and a space to prove themselves, both to patients and to a skeptical medical establishment. You might wonder why we still talk about January 23, 1849. It's because that day was more than a graduation. It was a spark that lit a movement. Look around a modern hospital, and you'll see women in every specialty, from neurosurgery to emergency medicine. None of that would be the same without Elizabeth Blackwell stepping onto that stage. She broke the myth that women were too fragile, too emotional, or too unscientific to handle the rigors of medicine. Her achievement also kicked off bigger questions about women's roles in other fields. If a woman could succeed as a doctor, why not in law, engineering, or even the highest levels of government? It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory that loosened the chains of expectation for women everywhere. That doesn't mean the battle ended. We still see lingering biases, wage gaps, and other hurdles. But people like Elizabeth helped pave a road that's continually widened. Each new wave of female trailblazers stands on the shoulders of those who dared to push the boundaries before them. If we peek at the personal reflections of the people around Elizabeth, we find a mix of admiration, confusion, and eventual respect. One classmate confessed that she understood anatomy better than most of the men in her cohort. Even a professor who initially saw her as a nuisance later admitted she was an outstanding student. These smaller shifts in perspective might not make history books in big headlines, but they're the little victories that chip away at old prejudices. Elizabeth herself admitted she felt isolated and judged. In letters to friends, she wrote about how people watched her every move, half expecting her to collapse under pressure. Yet she also described moments of pride when she felt her abilities speaking for themselves. Those personal notes remind us that she wasn't a distant figure in a portrait. She was a human being, dealing with stress, excitement, hope, and doubt, just like the rest of us. Naturally, not everyone embraced her success. Some critics claimed women doctors would ruin the profession's dignity, while others insisted a woman treating a male patient was socially unacceptable. Looking back, it's easy to roll our eyes at such objections, but at the time, they were enough to stir heated debates. Medical journals published opinion pieces questioning whether women had the resolve to face the horrors of surgery or the heartbreak of losing a patient. But for every critic, there was a female doctor out there quietly proving them wrong, one patient at a time. By treating people who'd been turned away from other hospitals, These women showed they had the knowledge, skill, and resilience to handle tough cases. Patients began to spread the word about the excellent care they received. Public trust grew, and little by little, the old arguments started to collapse under the weight of real evidence. Today, Elizabeth Blackwell's name graces awards, hospital wings, and organizations that encourage women to enter the medical field. But it's more than plaques and memorials. It's the lasting impact she left on every woman who picks up a stethoscope. She showed that change often starts with one determined person who refuses to take no for an answer. By pushing forward, she made sure that doors stayed open for future generations. Right now, you might be standing in a world that's vastly different from hers, but her story still matters. It's a reminder that progress is never guaranteed. It happens when somebody like Elizabeth stands up against a wall of doubt and refuses to back down. She lit a path in 1849 that's still guiding us, whether we're talking about gender equality, civil rights, or any other movement that challenges the status quo. So as we stand here, gazing back at that frigid January day in 1849, we see more than a single diploma exchange. We see a spark that lit the path for every woman in a white coat you encounter in hospitals today. Elizabeth Blackwell's name and her tireless dedication remind us that history's greatest leaps often begin with one courageous individual willing to breach an impenetrable wall. Will you let her story end here, or will you carry forward that spirit of transformation in your own life? Join us in keeping this legacy alive. Check out the links in the description and the first pinned comment for in-depth articles, Elizabeth Blackwell's own writings, and recommended books that shed light on her extraordinary life. If you believe in the power of these stories to inspire and educate, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. By doing so, you become part of a community that honors the past while shaping a fairer, brighter future. Thank you for watching and for remembering this indelible date, January 23rd, 1849, the day Elizabeth Blackwell forever changed the face of American medicine.